So Jesus is letting us know his true identity, the reason that he came, that rest is not a place or a day. He was talking about the Sabbath. We find rest in him. Many of us are restless or irritable or discontent. You might have heard that saying in a certain book. The big book of Alcoholics Anonymous says that's the core of all of our problems. We have this restlessness inside of us, this discontented, and that's a spiritual condition. And what Jesus is saying, you can find rest in me. And he's saying that he's the water of life. He's the blood. If you don't have blood, I'm going to assume that you're dead. Like the life is in the blood. That he is the body, the water, the rest, the Passover, the feast. And this is where they started to debate and divide. So we call this the great debate. And my friend, I get the honor of sponsoring a young man, and he would probably in his past be a professional debater. And so one of the values that I get working with somebody, they get to see things and go like, okay, no more debating. And I'm like, what? I don't want to debate either. Like it's actually helping me. And I found myself debating about certain politics last night. I was like, I don't care. Somebody was arguing about the weather. Is it minus 31 with the wind chill, or is it really 22? And I'm like, I don't want to debate this. I don't care. It's cold. Before James left this morning, he has a newer car. I have a diesel. I was like, James, just wait. I have to start my diesel car. It started, but barely. I don't want to debate. So thank you. I'm pointing you out. So this is a debate. Did anybody have any great debates this week? Oh, man. No one wants to talk about them now. It's just at bedtime. What time's bed? Oh yeah, I remember having younger children, and everything seemed like a debate. And there was a show called "You Gotta Be Smarter Than a Grade 5." Fourth, are you smarter? And there were so many times where I'm like in this debate, and I'm like, nope, not smarter, not being smarter at all. And now I'm starting to yell, and I'm like, I'm gonna take a timeout. That's my tip. Free tip, timeouts for you. So last week we looked at the testimony over Jesus, him saying that he's the light of the world. Have you ever been in the darkness? You know, like some of us may not be scared of the dark, but we're scared of the neighborhood that we live in, all of our thoughts and our thinkings. It's dark places in there. It gets us into the darkness in our personal lives. And he's saying and claiming that he's the light of the world as the festival of lights, as the festival of the harvest was coming to a close. The big barrels that were lit up to represent God in the night of the desert, the journey of 40 years. They knew the pillar. Imagine that. Imagine God as a pillar of fire at night. And this is the celebration that was just coming to a close. So these barrels were coming down. The lights were kind of going off. It's early in the morning. They had just brought an adulteress to deal with. They found a woman in adultery, and it was a trap for Jesus. And they didn't bring the man for some odd reason. But that was the setting. And Jesus saying, I am the light of the world. And then he says, I am he. Because they keep pressing him, and they would know this. Maybe some of us don't know this, but when Moses was being called to take the ton of people out of Egypt, out of slavery, he met the burning bush, and he was like, I don't want to do this. This is too big of a task. Imagine you had to take 1 million people into a desert out of freedom from Egypt, the Pharaoh, the chariots. Like, how do you do that? And God says, in a burning bush moment, trying to convince him, and he says, who's going to send me? And he says, I am who I am. And so they knew the God of all creation was I am. And so that's what he is saying about himself in this debate. He closed last week about saying that he is God. That's what he's saying. So we're going to dispute over whose children. I didn't set my timer. It's never too late, is it? who's Jesus's children's opponents are, and we're going to end with Jesus' claims about himself. Jesus, by the power of your Spirit, would you just give us ears to hear? Many of us have spent countless hours debating your name. Your name can literally suck the air out of the room at certain 12-step meetings, and in culture, and in government buildings, and at schools. And Jesus, we want to know who you are. We want to enter into these questions and try to understand who you really are for us. In Jesus' name, speak to us. Amen. To the Jews who had believed him, Jesus said, if you are holding on to my teachings, you are my real disciples. So there was an argument. A bunch of the Jews right then and there came to believe in him. And so now he's addressing them. If you hold on to my teachings, you are really my disciples. So you can tell a disciple of Jesus by what they're obeying. Then you will know the truth, and the truth will set you free. They answered him, we are Abraham's descendants and have never been slaves of anyone. How can you say that we shall be set free? Jesus replied, truly, very truly, I tell you, anyone who sins is a slave to sin. Now a slave has no permanent place in a family, but a son belongs to it forever. So if the Son sets you free, you will be free indeed. I was reminded of the sower and the seed. The sower and the seed is sowing the words of God. It's sowing the words of Jesus. And in that story, only a quarter of the hearts were saved. And so there's a lot of seed that's going out. There's a lot of us that have heard many multiple things and we haven't been free. I grew up with this. I grew up with praying for baby Jesus to come into my heart at 12 years old. And I really thought like Jesus would come, open a little gate in my heart and sit and reside, because that's kind of what everybody was talking about. Jesus lives in your heart. And I didn't feel any different. I didn't feel freer. I didn't feel more powered. I didn't feel like a tickle fight on the inside. I didn't feel anything. I just said the prayer. And my heart at that time wasn't open, but those seeds were planted my whole entire life. And now I'm at a homeless shelter, and all of a sudden it makes sense. And the ground becomes harvestable, plantable. And so in that story, you have hard ground, thorny ground, and rocky ground. And you might be one of them, or you might be the thorny ground right now. You might be a hard ground, and nothing is penetrating. But it doesn't mean it won't, and it doesn't mean it can't, because the seeds are always falling. And then the rain happens, and somebody starts taking away rocks, and all of a sudden you got little seeds that are sprouting. And your belief is in Jesus. But it doesn't mean your whole heart is like that. What I've come to understand is there's parts of my heart that are thorny. There's parts of my heart that were hard. And through our church family, through working with others, through being married, all of a sudden my heart gets challenged in certain areas that I've left God out of. And that's the journey that you're invited into, this love story, that you're not going to get it all figured out all in one day. You know, you come to the cross, you put your hands up, baby Jesus enters your heart. There's still going to be a lot of work to do. The cleanup is to come. And it's a beautiful thing. And they said that we're not slaves. That doesn't even make sense. They were descendants of the slavery in Egypt. They've always been slaves. If you read the Old Testament, they got spanked a lot by God, by their father. They got spanked a whole lot. Anybody grew up in the spanking area? We could talk about that later. Yeah, a few of us. And they got spanked a lot. They were God's children. They were a representative of the Creator. And then they went astray. They would build calves of gold. They would get into idol worship and all of that stuff. So they were slaves in Egypt. They were slaves in Syria, Babylonia, Macedonia. And at that point, where were they? What are we talking about? What era? The Roman era. They weren't even free there. So they're actually not even free right when they were saying that. But this is what Jesus is really saying. is we are all born apart from God. We're born into this world of fear. We're born apart from the garden. He's bringing the whole love story into this conversation. The love story started at the creation of man and woman in this garden. And then there was a tree or two. And they were told not to eat from that tree, the tree of knowing all things, the good and evil. And Eve had a little conversation about God without God. How many conversations do you have a day about God without God? Enter him in. Just say, time out. I don't like this conversation. You look like a snake. The thoughts in my head, I just need a time out. Let's go to my sponsor. Let's go to pastoral staff. I want a conversation with somebody else. I want a conversation with God in maybe a form of another person. How many conversations are you having in a day without God in your head? And then you're thinking them all again. And then you're thinking them the next day. And you have expectations of what things should be. And all of a sudden they build into what? Resentments. And they grow and they fester in your heart. And now your heart's thorny and hard. And you're not be able to receive. And so this is what Jesus' narrative is. You're born into this. You're born into hard, thorny, rocky ground. And you're born apart from God. And you're all slaves to the king of this world, the father of this world. And we'll get into that in a bit. We're all slaves. Fear is the enemy. Fear is Satan. Jesus is love. Jesus says there is no fear in perfect love. We get set free as slaves and become sons and daughters. So we're not born into it. We're not born into the Jewish family. We're outside of that. And Jesus is saying that there is freedom for all of us in a belief in me. We get to be sons and daughters. In verse 36, so if the Son sets you free, you will be free indeed. Jesus is the truth, the way. Only in him we will have life, true freedom for eternity. And that's we hear the Bible narrative of like it's a small road, it's a narrow road. And so many times you've heard like all paths go to God, all paths lead to the Creator. The reality is Jesus is saying hard things. There is one way to the Father, and it's a belief in me. It's a relationship with me because I'm the gatekeeper. I'm the good shepherd. You got to come in this way. And then he says, if you hold to my teachings, you are really my disciples. What are the teachings? Are you? Do you? What are the teachings that he's talking about? Do you know the truth? Are you free? And so some of you are thinking right now, what are the teachings? What am I supposed to do? What are the things that I'm doing that would disqualify me? What are those things? I don't want to sit up front and go, here's all the teachings of Jesus. This is what you should and should not be doing, because then we start making the rules. Then we start going like, well, you're not doing good enough. And you're doing good. And well, you're lifting 2 figs that are not dry. So you're breaking the law. And you get into this religious part of a relationship with God that actually leaves the Spirit of God out. And so do you know his teachings? And are you obeying them? Are you doing them? What's the first command? With all. That's an important word. And so some of your heart could love other things. I love my phone. I love my kids. And we should. I love this relationship. Oh, my job. I do this because I got to pay the bills and I got to do all this. And I leave God. It's easy to leave God out of certain areas of my life. I don't really need him there. It's all self-explanatory. What was that again? With all your heart. And then what's the next one? What? Love your neighbor as yourself. We could just sit and unpack that. I came in and I thought I loved myself because I really took care of myself. Me consuming everything. And I actually didn't. Imagine you did that to somebody else. the money that you spent, the intoxication, all the things you did, is that love? No, that's like murder. How do you love yourself? It's a good question. You got to have God's love. Verse 37, I know that you are Abraham's descendants, yet you are looking for a way to kill me, because you have no room for my word. Do you see that? That's contrary to what Jesus is talking about. Yet you're looking for a way to kill me. So you could pick up on that. I'm not to kill anybody. And you're like, okay, we won't ask that question. But how many people have we killed? Probably not that many, if at all. Maybe zero. Tres, you don't look like you've hurt anybody. No, never murdered, never done that thing. And it's like, but Jesus opens up the narrative. What is he saying? If you hate your brother or sister, you're committing murder. If you have resentment in your heart, if you have disdain or division for another brother or sister, if you're gossiping about them, what are you? A murderer. Right? And now you see the need for Jesus of like, oh, wow. What does he say about adultery? The actual act, or is it just lust? And all of a sudden you're like, oh, okay, all right, let's slow down on the rules. Let's bring in Jesus. This is where it gets tricky. Yet you are looking for a way to kill me, because you have no room for my word. I am telling you what I have seen in the Father's presence, and you are doing what you have heard from your father. Abraham is our father, they answered. If you were Abraham's children, said Jesus, then you would do what Abraham did. As it is, you are looking for a way to kill me, a man who has told you the truth that I heard from God. Abraham did no such thing. You are doing the works of your own father. We are not illegitimate children, they protested. The only father we have is God himself. So now it's getting heated. So now they're bringing their dads. They're not even bringing their moms. You know, when you trash somebody's mom, they're trashing dads. And they bring up illegitimate reasons because they know where Jesus came from. They know his parents. They would know that there was something fishy, that there was a baby before marriage. And back then, that's illegal. You would get killed for that. Until 100 years ago, that was highly frowned upon. People, even 50 years ago, 60 years ago, people would actually move away and have a baby for the shame that it would bring their family. This is 2,000 years ago. They're talking about two fathers. This is what Jesus is bringing up. There's actually two fathers. Here's the truth. There's two fathers. You're doing the ones that you're thinking and doing the commands of one father, and I'm coming from another father. And then they bring up Abraham. What are the works of Abe? What's he talking about? What are they talking about? What are they arguing about? Well, they bring in Abraham because that's who they're descendant from. That's where the covenant of God came from. That's where the blessing has come from. So in Genesis 15, and you could read this narrative through, it's very interesting of where this story has come from. Abraham was a man of faith. In verse 6, Abraham believed in the Lord, and he credited it to him as righteousness. And then there's a story in Genesis 22, and there's three men that come to Abraham, knock on the door. And it was angels. There was three of them, three angels. In this story, it talks about one of them having a bit of a different name, and that name was Jehovah, the existing one. And I believe it could have been Jesus. And so they were on their way to Sodom and Gomorrah to answer. They were on a mission. So they stopped in at Abraham's. They're on a mission to Sodom and Gomorrah to answer the outcry of evil. And they sit down and have a meal. They have communion with Abraham. It's a really cool story. Imagine having communion with some angels. That'd be a great experience. I believe some of us have seen angels without even knowing it. I know you have. Some of us have been in circumstances of life-threatening circumstances on the streets or whatever it is, or you might have been in your bedroom or whatever the circumstance is. I believe that I've fed 3 angels here. I invited one. One I didn't do so good. I felt I failed the test. I was like, nah. I was like, hey, you wanted a coffee? I'm like, oh. And it was just a traveler by, but we're at a dead end. No one travels here really. And then I was like, I felt convicted when the man left. I'm like, I didn't share the gospel. I didn't invite him into a narrative. I failed. Whatever test that was. I could have done better. I showed him where the bathroom was. That was it. Took a pee-pee. That's all I had to offer. Next guy comes in, and I believe he was from Egypt. It was just an odd conversation. I'm like, he's just sitting right where Sue was. And I came over. I'm like, are you hungry? He's like, oh, I'm starving. I'm like, okay, I got something. And then I grab a nut bar or whatever, and I give him something. I go, do you like potato chips? He's like, oh, I like potato chips. And then I said, do you want a drink? He's like, I like coffee. But we're a store, like we're a store. So then I make him a coffee, the finest John Ruby coffee that I could ever make. And it's one of my pleasures. I love making people good coffee. And I bring the payment thing over. Just so that, and hold the integrity of the shop. And I give him the coffee, and he's like, oh, I didn't know you had to pay. I'm like, you don't. I'm like, you don't have to pay. And I said, do you mind if I sit with you and have a drink? And I just started talking about where he's come from. He's a Muslim man, and he's coming from, and I got to hear his story, and I was like, you want to talk about Jesus? Do you believe in that? And we did. We started talking about Jesus. And at the end, I invited him to a baptism. And I was really thinking he would come. Could he have been an angel? I don't know. And I've had other conversations right in this little place. But I believe that we've talked to angels without even knowing it. Right, Gerald? You've seen angels. They usually smell different than we would think, or look a little bit different. These religious leaders didn't receive Jesus like Abraham did. They didn't receive the angels. They didn't receive what Jesus came to do. Jesus came to be received, believed and received. And then they went to Sodom and Gomorrah because they didn't believe or receive Jesus either. And Moses actually said, what's happening over there? Really? Is it like fireballs, like desolation? Wow. But what if there's one guy that we could save? And then he said, we will not do what we came here to do. Incredible story. They said that we are not illegitimate, illegitimate children. And they're taking a shot at him. They're chirping now. They got junior A hockey level chirping. Basically what they're calling, and I'm not going to say the word because of that, but they're calling him a B word. Can I say that? I asked my wife if I should, but it made sense in the context. But she's not here, so I don't want to get in trouble. She'll probably watch. Because he was born out of wedlock. His mom was pregnant before marriage. And it wasn't with Joseph, because Joseph was like, no, it wasn't me. And they're chirping him. Y'all said it in your head anyway. Jesus said to them, if God were your father, you would love me. For I have come here from God. I have not come on my own. God sent me. Why is my language not clear to you? Because you are unable to hear what I say. You belong to your father, the devil. There's 2 fathers now. He's not even bringing in Abraham anymore, because Abraham isn't their true father. There's 2 fathers in this world. And you want to carry out your father's desires. He was a murderer from the beginning not holding the truth, for there is no truth in him. When he lies, he speaks his native language, for he is a liar and the father of lies. Yet because I tell you the truth, you do not believe in me? Can any of you prove me guilty of sin? If I am telling you the truth, why don't you believe me? Whoever belongs to God hears what God says. Whoever belongs to God hears what God says. It doesn't say debates it. It hears. It doesn't say listens, hears. The reason you do not hear is that you do not belong to God. When I was just praying about this, I was like, we are like our fathers. A lot of us. As we grow up, I can look back and I'm like, I don't like my dad, really. He was very hard. I was the spanking kid. I needed a lot of them. I was very hyper. I was very unfocused. I was all over the place. Maybe some of you guys can relate to that. And I always felt like I was being held back. Like I got energy. I got to do all this stuff. And I grew up in an Islamic country where my parents were missionaries, and there was pews and there was sermons for hours. And I had to sit there. I don't understand a thing. And the interesting thing, as I was meditating on my childhood, I was like, man, I'm too much like my dad. Like, and it's like the whole time he was right about so many things, like how I drive. He taught me how to drive, and it's a piece of machinery. We got to test it out, Dad. We got an emergency brake here and everything. But he was like, slow down. Like all of those narratives in my head. And he was right when I look back. Or you might not have a dad, but we become of who's mentoring us or who we're around. Some of you have joined gangs or clubs because you just wanted to belong. And that's what's going to shape and mold you. And this whole time, there's two fathers. And you can wrestle with this of who you're hanging out with. Jesus says in John writes, God is love. God is love. Whoever lives in love lives in God and God in them. This is how love is made complete among us, so that we have confidence on the day of judgment. In this world, we are like Jesus. There is no fear in love, but perfect love drives out fear, because fear has to do with punishment. The one who fears is not made in perfect love. We love because he first loved us. How do you love? How do you love yourself? How do you love anybody else? You receive his love. When I received his love, as I stood up for prayer at a conference, I was filled with his love, and I realized instantly I've never loved anybody or anything in my life. I've taken advantage of, I've manipulated. There was always deals and wheels and Rolodexes of what people could do for me. I've never loved anybody in my life. And if you know where I've come from with Nana, that's the most loving person. She shows it in butter tart. She shows it in phone calls. She writes you letters. She prays for our church family every day, because we get prayer requests. So I grew up in it. But the only way that I could love is because I felt God's love. Whoever claims to love God, yet hates a brother or sister, is a liar. For whoever does not love their brother and sister whom they have seen cannot love God, whom they have not seen. And he has given us this command: anyone who loves God must also love their brother and sister. Takes out a lot of the guesswork. And I talk about affording things. You might be like me and have an alcohol and drug problem, and it drove your life, or you might not. But I say to me, I can't afford this. I can't afford to have resentment. I can't afford to dislike this person or just tolerate them. There are certain people, when you come into the room, you're like, oh, I need an extra measure. And it's like, am I really tolerant? Is that real tolerance? Is there really love? It doesn't enable. It doesn't mean enmeshment. It means that I actually love people for who they are and where they are. I'm not trying to control their outcomes. I'm not trying to dominate them or convince them of something. That helps me when people are butting heads or coming against stuff or whatever it is. It's just like, I can't afford this. I can't afford to have this debate. Let them go. I ran a rehab for 10 years. If I ran that with my heart of who I liked or didn't like, man, that would be a mess. But I learned, God put me in a situation to love, I'm going to say the hardest people. Yeah, I am one of those people, so I can say it. Put yourself in a rehab center. Everybody wants to get out. What do you mean 6 months? I just go to the 1 month. That's all I can tolerate. But go to a 9-month treatment center. Everybody wants to leave. I didn't get to leave. I was there for 10 years. That's how hard-headed I am. God put me in that situation to love us unlovable people at a high measure. And it's just cracking the surface. It's cracking the hard dirt in my heart. But he put me in position to try to understand what love is. That's the beautiful journey. Whoever claims to love God, yet, I read that one. Anyone who loves God must also love, I read that one too. So if you want the verses, that's 1 John 4:16. This is how you can recognize in verse 4 of 1 John 4. This is how you can recognize the Spirit of God. You want to recognize the Spirit of God. You don't need supernatural gifting. That does help. You don't need discernment of spirits necessarily. This is how you recognize the Spirit of God, the fellowship of the Spirit. Every spirit that acknowledges that Jesus Christ has come in the flesh is God. That's your quiz. If you want to see what unity is, that's what we believe in. But every spirit that does not acknowledge Jesus, acknowledging Jesus is not from God. This is the spirit of the Antichrist, which you have heard is coming and even now already in this world. In 2 Thessalonians 2:9, the coming of the lawless one will be in accordance, and I'm talking about the father of this world, in accordance with how Satan works. He will use all sorts of displays of power through signs and wonders that serve the lie, and all the ways that wickedness deceive those who are perishing. They perish because they refuse to love the truth. So be saved. And I believe that in these days now, we have to hold on to this even tighter. We need to be going to this. We don't need to be going to the TV and the opinions of popular or the big signs and wonders. Those are all great. The gifts of the Spirit should actually enable us to be warriors, to give us insight, to give us supernatural powers of healing and prayer and all those things. But we got to be rooted in the Word of God because this is the truth. And it's one of the reasons we just preach the Bible. Somebody said to me, you don't really preach about giving and tithing. I'm like, I think every message is about giving and tithing. Like, give your life. I remember coming into my new life after treatment, and I'm like holding on to $100 bills. I got ground to make up. And I'm like, if I'm holding on to 100, I'm holding on to a whole lot more because money is just a symptom. No one has money problems. You have heart problems. Hard, rocky, thorny hearts. So every message is about giving. Every word in this Bible is give, give, give. You got to give your heart. And your time will follow. What you find of value will follow. Your money will follow. Your time to drive people will follow. Your tolerance will follow. All of it will follow. So I think every message is. Even Pontius Pilate could find no sin to implement capital punishment on Jesus. So these Jewish leaders in this debate is like, you're in sin and we're going to kill you because you're claiming these claims. But at the end of this, you're going to find out that Pontius Pilate, the governor, couldn't even implement him to go to jail. So imagine doing nothing wrong, having accusations, going to court, And the judge goes, well, this is ridiculous. There's nothing here. Imagine the tension of all of this as a human. Man. The Jews answered him, aren't we right in saying that you were Samaritan and demon possessed? Now they're going hard to the hole. They're name calling. They're basically calling him a half-breed demon man. Which he calmly answers. Maybe he wasn't calm. I don't know. Maybe they were all getting heated. I am not possessed by a demon, said Jesus, but I honor my Father, and you dishonor me. I am not seeking glory for myself. That's another good measure on the Spirit of God, the Spirit of Jesus. I am not seeking glory for myself. Think about Instagram and Facebook. We'll just leave that one there. But there is one who seeks it, and he is the judge. Very truly, I tell you, whoever obeys my word will never see death. I'm not going to stop there. I'm going to include another word. Don't let your left hand know what your right hand is doing in giving. And Facebook and Instagram demand that your left hand knows exactly what the left hand's doing, the right hand and all of your hands know exactly what I'm doing and how great I'm doing and how great I'm losing weight and my facial complexion and the holidays that I'm going on and all of this great stuff that I'm doing. I want to challenge you with that. Sorry, I didn't stop where I said I was. At this they exclaimed, now we know you're demon possessed. Abraham died, and so did the prophets. Yet you say that whoever obeys your word will never taste death. Are you greater than our father Abraham? He died, and so did the prophets. Who do you think you are? I can see Jesus going, yes, I am. They're pointing out that Abraham is dead. Remember the Samaritan woman at the well? Are you greater than our father Jacob that dug this well? They're asking the same question. You can ask Jesus that question too. Are you greater than Muhammad? Are you greater than Buddha? Are you greater than these crystals and these books and these cards that I go to, the readers? Are you greater than that? Jesus replied, if I glorify myself, my glory means nothing. My Father, who you claim as your God, is the one who glorifies me. Though you do not know him, I know him. If I said I did not, I would be a liar like you. But I do know him and obey his word. Your father Abraham rejoiced at the thought of seeing my day. He saw it and was glad. I really had to pray about that. Like Abraham rejoiced at the thought of seeing my day. He saw it and was glad. Like Abraham saw Jesus. How did that happen? Like it doesn't really read that in the Bible. You could interpret one of the angels with Jesus. You could interpret that the high priest Melchizedek was Jesus and they had communion together. There was a couple incidences, but he had a son. Imagine you have a son and you hear the word of the Lord, go take your son and sacrifice him on a mountain. You're like, that can't be the Lord. Like I would have trouble with that. I'd have trouble dragging my son anyway to go for a hike. He's too big now. He would say, no, you're dumb. That's exactly what he would say. You know it. I hear it. And so he brings his son and they go up and they prepare. Little Isaac's like, what's going on, Dad? Like, there's no lamb. We got nothing. What are we going to do? What's the barbecue all about? And just as Abraham going to bring the knife down, stop. Look over there. I've provided. And I believe that's what Abraham was excited about. There's always going to be, Jesus is the lamb that gets the sacrifice, that takes our punishment. You will never be punished again. You're an adult. There's going to be consequences for your life. But if you go and sin no more, that means I am going to be in relationship with Jesus for the rest of my life. I don't want to wander too far. I don't want to wander that way too far. I'm on the narrow gate living a life that I've given everything to Jesus. He might do some dumb things, but I'm not living in fear. I'm not living out of the garden. I'm living in the garden with Jesus. That's the invitation that you're invited into. You are not yet 50 years old, they said, and you have seen Abraham. Very truly, I tell you, Jesus answered, before Abraham was born, I am. At this, they picked up stones. Remember the stones that they had dropped to kill the adulteress? They're still there. This is one debate now going on back and forth. They picked up the stones to stone him, but Jesus hid himself, slipping away from the temple grounds. They believe he committed blasphemy because they figured out, you're saying, I am. You're saying that you were in the burning bush. You were saying that you're saying that you were God. That's blasphemy. Jesus talks to people in Luke, and it was the same idea where it's like, you just cast out a demon, so you're doing it by demons. And Jesus said that any kingdom divided against itself will be ruined, to a house divided against itself will fall. If Satan is divided against himself, how can his kingdom stand? I say this because you claim that I drive out demons by Beelzebub. But if I drive out demons by Beelzebub, by whom do your followers drive them out of? So then, they will be your judges. But if I drive out demons by the finger of God, then the kingdom of God has come upon you. When a strong man, fully armed, guards his own house, his possessions are safe. But when someone stronger attacks and overpowers him, he takes away the armor in which the man trusted and divides up his plunder. Whoever is not with me is against me, and whoever does not gather with me scatters. You can't cast out demons with Satan's power. That's what he's saying. So either you have one of two fathers. Either Jesus is everything or he's nothing. And you're living in a lie of whose father you're really under. Either you're with Jesus or you're against him. And I think being passive and doing nothing is actually being against him. Passivity is an action. Either Jesus is everything or he's nothing. What side of the debate are you on? And you might be in the debate of going, I believe Jesus, but I haven't received him in this part of my life. Maybe that's for you. Of like actually receiving him in the highest measure that you can, of like your life does not belong to you anymore. And that's a good thing, because you are not going to receive the punishment at the end of time. You're going to be sitting with Jesus in eternity. We're going to be part of a new heaven and a new earth. And we're going to be worshiping Jesus all day long, doing cool stuff with cool new bodies. Can't wait. So I invite you into that narrative. Maybe that's you, that there is some parts of your heart that are a little bit stony. There's some parts of that you're withholding. I just want you to have time to be able to pray about that. Or maybe it's all new to you. And maybe you're like, I've been sitting on this fence. And all of a sudden the farmer plugged it in and it's electric now. You're like, whoa, you just got zapped a little bit. And you want to put your belief in Jesus and receive him.